morning and welcome to First United Congregational Church of Christ here in Waterloo, Iowa. My name is Carrie Meniga and I will be serving as our worship leader today. Welcome to our church where no matter where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
Welcome to First Congregational United Church of Christ of Waterloo, Iowa, a community of faith where you matter. God created you to matter and we believe that you do matter. You matter if you are LGBTQIA+, if that fits your sexual orientation, as well as if it doesn't. For God has made us all as we are, and we trust that loving people just as they are is what really matters. You matter no matter your age or ethnicity or mental or emotional or physical attributes or family structure. Jesus believes you matter no matter your past or your present. You matter if you have a criminal record or a felon or have never been arrested. You are a person of inestimable worth who we believe needs to be loved just as you need to love others. So welcome to this haven of hope where we want you to always know and to feel that you matter.
Welcoming the light of love in our midst. We prepare ourselves for communing with the sacred as love's light is brought into our awareness. The light of love burns within and among each of us, and we carry that light into our sanctuary, visually reminding us of the image of the divine that lives in our hearts, minds, and souls, and that we nourish through our faith-filled fellowship. Centering our souls. Imaginer and giver of love, life's greatest gift, teach us how to creatively love one another and all of creation.
Because love is patient, help us to restrain our reactive impulses and consider how to best love others after fully hearing their story.
Because love is kind, help us to be mindful of how an expression, a word, a deed, and our commitment to care for others can bless their lives.
Because love is not envious, boastful, or rude, help us to be the content with the love we have received, to graciously and humbly give our love without thought of pride, and to always seek to help others rather than impose our will upon them.
Because love is not insistent upon its own way, is not irritable or resentful, help us to put your way, not our own, first, to seek to understand rather than to judge, and to be wakefully grateful for life's presence of blessings rather than be disdainfully upset at what did not become a blessing.
Because love is rejoiceful in the truth and never in wrongdoing, help us to tilt our minds towards wisdom, to bend our hearts towards understanding, and to focus our spirits on discovering and acting on your values in our lives.
Because love is a virtue that bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Help us to develop souls that are resilient, faithful, expectant, and persevering.
Because love is never ending, help us to put our trust in it over all other values. For in doing so, we unite your spirit with ours.
We are thankful for the gift of love that you have instilled in each and every one of us. And so we ask for your insight in how we can better bestow this gift to others each and every day of our lives.
For in loving as you love us, we help bring our hopes to reality, and we help to make our faith a way of life.
May our hope and faith be in love, that spirit which you so want us to have fully so that we may share it in all of our relationships and to all the world.
Because love is the greatest of all gifts, help us to be the greatest of givers, now and always. Blessings may we be.
Arise, your light is come, all spirits call obey. Show forth the glory of your God, which shines on you today. Arise,
for the children's message, but first I want to share some scripture from the Bible that comes from 1 Corinthians 13. It says, "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." Take it away, Reporter Abby. Hello, I'm Reporter Abby, and I'm joining you today from Waterloo, Iowa. I'm here to report on the love in action that has been seen around the Cedar Valley the last couple of weeks. I understand that we have some eyewitness accounts to love in action right here in the Cedar Valley, and I will share some with you today. In the category of love is patient, Cedar Bend Humane Society celebrated many adoptions of animals who had long awaited to find their forever homes. In the category of love is kind, Northeast Iowa Food Bank sponsored an event where they pulled in many volunteers who dedicated their time to putting together backpacks of food to be donated to local kids. In the category of love is not self-seeking, Love Inc. resumes their Begin Now classes, which include free transportation and a free meal to participants. Their classes seek to build up and enhance the lives of others. In the category of Love Always Hopes, Cedar Valley United Way donated a number of books for new babies and their families to Allen Hospital in hopes to help sponsor and promote early childhood reading habits, which have been shown to improve livelihood throughout life. Here you go, have it, folks. Love in action around the Cedar Valley. Back to you, Youth Director Abby. Thank you, Reporter Abby, for sharing these loving stories that are happening all around us. This week, I'm going to thank the cashier when I pick up my groceries. What will you do this week to create an atmosphere of love in your community? Will you pray with me? Dear God, thank you for loving us and showing us how we can use love to help others. In your name we pray, amen.
As we turn our hearts and minds to prayer this week, please keep in mind those that we've listed in our prayer request from past weeks and any others that may be on your heart. We have no one new that I am aware of that needs to be added to the list this week, but keep in mind all those who are sick or suffering, hungry, or in need, and especially those who have been victimized by violence and oppression. As far as those who have joys and celebrations, we hope that you'll share those with us. We'd love to celebrate those with you. As for random acts of kindness, we keep in mind all those things that we do together. I've got on my list, and I'm probably going to have to do it next time, but one that somebody gave to me that I'm going to pass on. But this week I wanted to do one especially with regards to the theme for the day, which is love for others. And so we have a case where a mother has a 6-year-old child by the name of Blake Rajan, and Blake was going to his first day of school, and his mother, Nikki, had offered him to make a t-shirt with anything that he liked on it. Now, she assumed that he would like to have something on it to do with basketball or football or some other sport or activity that he loved. But after thinking about it a while, Blake asked her for a t-shirt that simply said, "I will be your friend." He explained it is for all those kids who need a friend to know that I am there for them. And while most kids are worried about themselves feeling lonely at school, Blake was thinking of his neighbors. We don't have any doubt that the t-shirt and his friendly grin helped a lot of first graders. Let us be in silent meditation as we, God's people, lift up our prayers, and then I'll follow our silence with a pastoral prayer. O God, giver of the greatest gift of love, we are thankful for the love we have received in life, and we are blessed to have given what love we have to others. Help us to increase our love, not only for whom we have already given it, but to all whom we have not yet given it. Teach us how to intentionally look for ways to love one another better. And when we see others not being loving, oh God, help us to offer the encouragement to do better while not casting them off as unworthy of our time or efforts. For we increase love by not only giving it to those who welcome it, but perhaps especially to those we give it to who pretend they don't even want it. Make us wise to know when and how best to share our love with others. Make us courageous and loving despite how doing so may make us appear weak or trite or subservient. For we know the real strength lies not in giving love where we know it will take seed, but where we doubt that it ever will. Help us to make our lives miracles of love, transforming our own hearts and minds, if not also those of others. Where we can be a blessing, help us to know how. Where we can lift another spirit, incite us to do so with joy. Help us to be kind and merciful, to be encouraging and honest, to be faithful and wise, to be equitable and giving, and to be compassionate and inspiring. Grant us the strength to be your people. May it be so.
Father, Mother of the cosmos, shimmering light of all, focus your light within us as we breathe your holy breath. Enter the sanctuary of our hearts, uniting within us the sacred rays of your power and beauty. Let your heart's desire unite heaven and earth through our sacred union, on earth as it is in heaven. Help us fulfill what lies within the circle of our lives today. Forgive our secret fears as we freely choose to forgive the secret fears of others. Let us not enter forgetfulness, tempted by false appearances. For from your astonishing fire comes the eternal song which sanctifies all, renewed eternally in our lives and throughout all creation. We seal these words in our hearts, committed in trust and faith. Today's scripture lesson comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting at verse 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love.
A heads up for you. This morning's message will be among the most heartfelt messages that you have heard from me, and one which I can say I put my all into. In composing it, it brought me to tears, for it is about the most important experience we have in life, and I wanted to give you my best thoughts about it, even if doing so results in a substantially longer message than usual. I've heard it said, we best love those we are willing to put extra time in being with. So out of love, I give you a longer but hopefully blessed message about the greatest gift of all. I pray you will pray with me that I can get through this without tearing up. I dedicate it to my parents. I was and still am blessed with the parents I have. They are, like me, not perfect people, with the possible exception of being perfect in one way, of their unconditional love for me and my brother. Certainly they were not perfect in all the specific ways in which they acted on that love, but I suspect at least they were perfect in the generalized way in which they loved us no matter what. Their intentions and motives, I trust, were always done out of love for us, even if they may not have always had the wisdom of God in knowing how to love in every instance that my brother and I felt we most needed to be loved. Now, I don't know as a fact that their intentions and their motives were always done for love with us. But since I have no evidence that this was not the case, I'm content in trusting that they were indeed perfect in their intentions and motives. And that trust has made a difference, a big one, in my life. Because I believe they could do it, it is also what I strive to do in my life. Their love encouraged me to be loving in the same way. Their love created in me expectations of myself and how I was to be towards others and the world. And that in turn has taught me how wonderful that unconditional love really is, of how Jesus and then Paul were right about love being the greatest of all gifts, the greatest of all things we could ever experience, the greatest of all things we could ever share. That unconditional love my parents have for my brother and I is what I would testify as being the greatest gift they could have ever given to me. I had the exceptional good fortune of being born into a family in which I have known my whole life long that my parents loved me and still love me. That kind of love is indeed wonderful to feel. It positively shapes one's outlook on life and one's view of the world in ways that likely would not be possible without that felt love in our lives. And because I truly believe this, it makes me have more compassion for those who I discovered did not feel that kind of love, which I have always known. I see their acting out and their misbehavior in a different light than if they were people who were loved unconditionally and simply chose another path. Now, this doesn't mean I don't think they should be held accountable for their actions, but rather that some mercy is in order for those who have never been taught how to love unconditionally. For that is huge in how it shapes our consciousness and our consciences. I have sometimes wondered throughout my life what it would have been like if I would have never felt the unconditional love of my parents and at least one set of grandparents. It isn't pretty, the images that come to mind. Just imagining it is nearly a traumatic experience for me. The devastation I'd have felt if I had not felt loved unconditionally by my parents is more than I can imagine I could take. The thought of it sends shudders through my being, for I would certainly not be the person I am now if it were not for their love. I suspect that my life would have turned out very differently. Perhaps like a friend of mine in my youth who believed that his father didn't love him. This friend became addicted to drugs to soothe the pain in his life. And ever since, it's been something that has affected him in a way that I don't think any of us would ever want for anyone. I can't say that the lack of love that he felt and the abundance of love that I felt was the whole reason for why our lives took different paths. But I suspect it had an important role to play. My heart aches for him in that he didn't feel loved by his father, for I know that crushed his spirit. And despite some of the things he has done as an addict, I have compassion for him in knowing that he was not given what he needed to become the man I believe he could have been. I still think he should pay restitution for some of the things that he has done. But I also believe that to treat him cruelly or disrespectfully, as our penal system treats violators of the law, would be wrong. For what he needs is rehabilitation. What he needs is to be shown the unconditional love that he never knew from his father. What I have learned from life and contrasting his experiences to my own is this: being loved unconditionally creates expectations, not only in the ones who do the loving, but also in the ones who are being loved. My friend initially was much like me in not wanting to disappoint his parents, but then I noticed a change in him when he got into high school. To my consternation, he stopped caring about disappointing his parents. From my perspective at that time, this was not okay. It was his fault, I believe, for not having the proper respect for his parents. But looking back on what I now see as an adult, I think that he finally gave up on trying to not disappoint his parents, well, at least his father, because he came to understand that there was literally nothing in his power that he could do to gain his respect. No matter how well he did in school, in sports, in church, or in any other aspect of life, my friend constantly heard criticism. Granted, it would lessen when he did really well at something, but even his best successes were never enough. Not enough for him to feel that his father loved him unconditionally. My friend's greatest fear, I believe, is that he wasn't loved. And while I think his mother loved him, she wouldn't stand up to his father. And while I think in his own way, his father loved him, it was rarely, if ever, displayed in a way in which it felt unconditional. And so my friend never really developed in himself the desire to love others unconditionally, for he never really learned to love himself unconditionally. And I think that is the true tragedy of his life. In contrast, I never got to a point where I didn't care if I disappointed my parents. Not so much for fear that I wouldn't be loved, but rather knowing that I would not live up to the expectations of myself, which were the results of the expectations they had of me. Because they loved me, I saw the value of that love and the value of the other virtues that require one to live and act with love. Now, my parents certainly made clear their expectations of me. Some thought I had it really rough. But because they loved me, I saw that I was asked to live up to these expectations because of their love. Because of their desire to have me to be a loving person as well. Because they showed me and this love and had these expectations for me, it took root in my heart and soul. It took root in a way that would have never happened if they were always criticizing me rather than telling me that I was loved. Both of my parents, in different ways, have a soft spot in their hearts that they have passed on to me and my brother by their own example. My mother would always tell us, my brother and I, that she loved us regularly. She also told us that my dad, who was not as expressive when we were growing up, that he loved us too. I've come to recognize over the years that my dad, as well as my mom, both have really soft hearts. And I recognize now that they both go out of their way to let us know that they love us still. Without fail, every time we talk on the phone, my parents will end the conversation with, "I love you," or "We love you." And when I get a chance to visit them, I never leave the house without those same words, accompanied by a fairly lengthy hug. This is true even when neither my brother nor I always lived up to their expectations of us. When that happened, they would show their disappointment and rarely even their anger, but they did not let that be the last thing that they said to us. There was always the "I love you" that inevitably followed. And I think it is that kind of resilient and unfailing love that helps us to learn how to love ourselves and others. Paul, like Jesus, loved people. And while they both expressed their disappointment and even anger at people who acted badly, usually less for those who acted out of need rather than those who acted out of a sense of superiority, they still loved them. Now, granted, they would reprimand those in authority whose actions caused many unnecessary pain and suffering. But they still wanted those bad people to be a part of the community. They just needed to change their ways for the better so that others weren't injured. People harming others is what they were most concerned about. And their judgments on those who did the harming were actually done out of love and wanting them to be respectable again in the community. In judging them, they did not want to ostracize them, but rather to get them to be more loving so that others might feel and know their love. They seemed much less concerned with actions that really hurt no one but themselves. And they were also lenient on those who genuinely made mistakes in specific instances, but who they did not judge as being a bad person for that one instance of not being their best selves. Is this the way that we are in our society? Decades ago, we were told that we were the throwaway society for the way that we built and used things in which we knew they wouldn't last. Whether making and using paper or styrofoam tableware rather than the washable ones, or a myriad of other consumer items that were used temporarily and then disposed of. We did change our value system and how we treated the things that we owned. But the bigger problem, in my estimation, came when we acted like that towards people. When we treated them like things that were disposable rather than persons who are of inherent worth. When we started creating more prisons than rehabilitation centers premised on restorative justice. When we came to see marriage not as a covenant for life, but one of convenience. When we came to see employees as automatons and servants, rather than people with whom we cared for and respected. When we started casting aside family relationships and friendships whenever we couldn't see eye to eye. And when we let all of this throwaway mentality infect even our church life. People today in all aspects of life seem to give up on each other rather easily. I have seen it happen to others and certainly myself, where people give up on you because you have a difference of opinion, because you made a mistake, or simply thought to have made a mistake, whether you did or not. Or when differing visions of how to be family, friends, or even the church didn't mesh. Or when people didn't like some aspect of your personality, or how you dressed, or even how you looked. To give up on anyone for these reasons is not to love them. People who give up on you for things like these never really loved you. They rather used you for their own purposes until they discovered they could no longer do so, at least not as effectively as they had wished. So I don't encourage you to pay much heed to those who clearly break off their good feelings for you as soon as you make a mistake, or simply disagree with the way you do things. Anyone who ever treats you like this does not love you unconditionally. No way, no how. But those who love us even when we clearly have made mistakes, even though they may be disappointed and angry with us at the time, they create a code of integrity about themselves that makes us want to take their views under serious consideration. Am I not right on this? When people truly love us, we don't have to worry that the love will be withdrawn whenever we make mistakes or don't live up to expectations. They may be upset for a time, but that goes away, and the love remains. It is those who can never forgive, who are always looking for the bad in you, who always seem to have to criticize rather than compliment, and who are never content as long as you are not acting in accordance with what they would have you to do. That we need to recognize that those people never have loved us. But, this is a big but, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't love them. We may not want to be around them. Sure. We may not think well of their behavior. Granted. But we still need to take care of them and do our best to encourage, not criticize, them to be the best people they can be. Perhaps they have never known unconditional love. Perhaps they did and simply got caught up in wanting other things and not seeing that unconditional love was enough and was the only thing that they really needed. You see, people who are conned into thinking they need more from life than love have a hard time admitting that they were conned, placing more importance on their being right than on their being loving. But whatever the reason is that people aren't as loving as they should be, it doesn't take away from the importance of we ourselves being loving in our lives, even to them. This too, I learned from my parents. They loved me not out of simply the duty of being my parents, but because they hoped for me to be the best person they had faith I could be. A person who would also be loving. They loved me too because they wanted to love me. They loved me out of the joy in their hearts, not just a parental obligation. They wanted me to grow up to be a loving person myself so that love would be spread still further in this world of ours. And their patience and determination to stick with that plan, even when it didn't seem to be working as well as hoped for, was one of the greatest gifts they ever gave me. They loved me through thick and thin, good times and bad times, happy times and sad ones. And of all the things I am grateful for in my life, their love stands at the top. They revealed the importance of love, and not only being loved, but by also loving. You see, there's this twist to being loved unconditionally. While it is incredibly encouraging and inspiring and makes you feel good all over, it also has the effect of making you see how much responsibility you have to go and do likewise. The expectation level of how you yourself are supposed to live when you're loved unconditionally is off the charts. You recognize what an overwhelming responsibility it is for you to love others as you have been loved, especially when it includes more people in your life than just those that you love and who love you unconditionally. You see, it's easy to love those who love us, but it's much more difficult to love those who clearly don't love us. Jesus went so far as saying that it was no great honor to love only those who loved you, but that loving those who don't love you, even your enemies, now that is honorable. This doesn't mean we need to put up with their abuse or their mistreatment. No. But it does mean that we have to care for them as people who should be loved even when they aren't loving themselves. My friend I was speaking of earlier, I never wanted to go to his house. I didn't like his father's behavior. For every time I was there, I could hear his father blame and criticize him for one thing or another. And even in those times where there was some substance to the accusations, I just couldn't understand how the way they were delivered could ever be helpful to my friend. Yet I knew his father well enough to have heard him say that he thought the criticism he doled out was for his boy's own good, to shape him into a better person. But I honestly can say that it would have never worked for me. And it didn't work for my friend either. We don't improve by being told how often we messed up, but by how we are told that we are loved, even when we have messed up. Even still, I wish my friend and his father could have experienced this kind of encouragement and unconditional love in their lives. I think it would have changed everything for them. But sometimes our society teaches us things that aren't for our own good and which also keep us from seeing the good in ourselves and each other. And that is the shame. I have come to the understanding that we who think we are more civilized than other cultures are actually not so civilized after all. Our methods of discipline are not only not better than those of some other cultures, but far worse. We can learn much about relationships, forgiveness, and love from cultures that we have traditionally thought of as uncivilized. One of the most powerful stories I've ever heard comes from the Babemba tribe in South Africa. Like in our own culture, sometimes individuals mess up, make mistakes, and do genuinely bad things. But when that happens in their society, the person who has acted badly, irresponsibly, unjustly, or even maliciously is placed in the center of the village. They are not tied up, restrained, or put in a cage. There is no trial date set, no judge, no jury, nor a system to decide what kind of punishment they are to receive. Instead, the entire village is asked to cease their work and activities so they can, as a community, be there for the edification and the improvement of this one member of their people who has acted wrongly. All the people of the village, from young to old, come to the center of the village and gather around the offender. They encircle the offender, who is left alone in the center of that circle with everyone else they know all around them. Then, each person in the village, one by one, until every last person has spoken, is asked to speak to the offender. And not just a few sentences, but at length. Each one of them recalls the good things about the person sitting in the village, in the middle of that village circle. They recount positive experiences that they had with that person and all the good deeds, admirable attributes, strengths, talents, and displays of kindness and compassion that that person has ever done that they can recall. From the time that person was a baby up to the present time. Because everyone in the village speaks, this ceremony lasts for several days. They don't keep time and wonder whether it's taking too long. Each one speaks for as long as they feel compelled, and everyone, not just the offender, listens to each word said. The offender is made to listen to every positive word that everyone in the entire village has to say about him or her. They remind the person of who she or he truly is. They testify to the goodness of that person in the person's character and their behaviors for the entirety of their lives. They don't speak of bad things about the person at all, no matter how many bad things they have done. But they only testify to the good. It is to let the person know that the whole village sees them for who they were truly born to be and who they have actually been at different times in their lives, even if for moments. The effect is powerful. The offender is made to see who they really are and the expectations of who they should be. These are made evident by the stories of those who they have been in their best moments. Nothing bad is said of the person in the entire process, only the good points. This is the process of rehabilitation in their society. And it seems to work in most cases. Recidivism is, I'm told, a fraction of what it is in our own society. At the end of days of only positive things being said to this person, after every person has spoken, the circle is opened up and a joyous celebration takes place. The assumption is that the person has changed for the better, and trusting this helps make it so. The person has not only been rehabilitated, but restored to a role of respectworthiness in the community. The person is welcomed back into the community, literally and symbolically. And this is how unconditional love is manifested in a whole community towards each person who happens to have not been their best selves in a particular incident. Personally, I think we need to adopt this method in our churches and in our society. It is the way we best love one another when any is thought to have not lived up to what they are called to be. It is a way of not only accepting people who have made mistakes, but loving them back into being the best versions of themselves. It isn't what rather I should ask the question, is it not what we all should be doing? Is it not what giving the gift of love looks like from a divine perspective? Ask yourselves, if you were the person who went astray, what would be your response to this whole village, its display of unconditional love for you? Would you think to yourself that you surely pull the wool over their eyes? Or would you be so appreciative of their forgiveness and love that you would want to live up to being your best self from now on? How would their recounting of every good thing you ever did in their presence make you feel? Would you be inspired to never act as you had just done ever again? Would you be encouraged in knowing that no matter how bad your act was, you would still be loved and accepted by them as a member of the community? Wouldn't you want to live up to the respect they showed for you by not belaboring what you did wrong, but rather by their belaboring of what you did right? When we feel loved, genuinely loved, it not only encourages us to be our best selves, it also raises our expectations of ourselves. Being loved makes us want to be more responsible to the wider community. There comes a responsibility we feel in having been loved. And it makes us to want to live up to the expectations of those who genuinely love us. It makes us to want to be better people ourselves, even as we have been loved. And this is what Paul in this passage and Jesus before him tried to teach us themselves. It's what I try to teach everyone I know, for I am convinced with them that love, unconditionally given and wisely applied, is indeed the greatest gift of all. May we all become lovers of love, so that we may all better love one another. May we make it so.
Once long ago, a rabbi came preaching, "Turn now your hearts, for God is so near. You who have sought and still now are reaching, hear the good news that will strengthen and cheer. Share now our love and make it surprising. Share now our love and let it be seen. We are the yeast for justice arising. We will lift up those who once were unseen. Are you prepared for life lived most daring? Are you prepared for how you might grow? Will you be one who's constantly caring?